welcome back to A Change of Heart podcast. I wanted to do a bonus episode today because the month of July is Fibroid Awareness Month. And earlier this month, I shared my fibroid journey and ultimately making the decision to have a uterine fibroid embolization. And I had that back in March of this year. And I wanted to share my experience because when I looked it up, I'll be honest, there were horror stories about women's experience with getting a uterine fibroid embolization. And I had a very positive experience. And so I want to share that for anyone who is considering it and may be afraid or just questioning if it's the right route for them. I wanted to share a positive experience. So let's get into it. So in this video, I'm going to talk about the process leading up to me having the procedure experience itself, the cost, and then also what my recovery was like. So going forward, I'm going to reference the uterine fibroid embolization as UFE. So I started doing my research back in January of this year after having a lot of options that were not things that I wanted to take when it came to treating my fibroids. And I came across the Richmond Vascular Center, and spoiler alert, I recommend them hands down over and over again. I had Dr. McLaurin who did my UFE, and I had such a positive experience with him, the staff, the procedure itself. I would highly recommend any woman to him. And this is coming from someone who did not want a male doctor for this procedure. So with that in mind, I had a consultation with him back in January, and that was maybe like an hour 15. And he was so thorough in answering all of my questions. He was very passionate about doing UFEs, and he was just very knowledgeable, and I felt very comfortable of going forward. So prior to me actually scheduling the procedure, I had to have a MRI done. And the purpose of the MRI was to determine the size of the fibroids and what types of fibroids that I had. So I had my MRI back in February, and at that time I found out that I had 3 fibroids. And my fibroids were 1.3 centimeter fundal submucosal, 5.9 centimeter intramural, and then 6.5 centimeter intramural submucosal. And I'll put images in here. I'm not going to go into depth about finding out I had fibroid symptoms and all of that, because I talked about that in my previous video. I'll link that, but this I wanted to focus solely on the UFE. And so I had my MRI, and then I had a follow-up appointment with the doctor sometime like mid-February. So during the follow-up appointment, he went over my MRI results with me, and then he also went over what the actual UFE procedure is. And we talked about that during the consultation as well. But during this time, he had graphs, he had the catheter to show me exactly what it was going to look like and what exactly the process would be overall. For anyone who is not familiar or never heard of uterine fibroid embolizations, so it is a non-surgical procedure. So it is an outpatient procedure. You're not in the hospital for it. It is not a surgery. So they insert a catheter into the groin area. So it can either go into like the inner part of your thigh, or there's some people who do it through your wrist. Mine was through my groin, which I'll talk about that later. But they insert it into the groin to access the vessels that surround your fibroids. And then the radiologist injects beads through the catheter, and it ultimately cuts off the blood supply. And so with that, the goal of it is to, as the blood supply of your fibroids are being cut off, it ultimately shrinks your fibroids over time. And so I went ahead and decided to go forward with booking the UFE, and I scheduled it for March 24th. And the reasoning for that, there was no delay or backlog or anything on their behalf. My mom was having a surgery in February, and I wanted to make sure I could help her, and I knew she'd want to help me while I was going through my recovery as well. So I opted to do it at the end of March. So during this appointment, he also went ahead and gave me my post-procedure instructions, and it was lengthy, okay? And I'm going to go over that as well, but it covered the prescriptions that I was going to be taking for my first 7 days of recovery, also the things that I could not do after my recovery for 2 weeks and things I couldn't do for 30 days. Then he also went over the prescription medications I would have to take and just certain things to be mindful of throughout the procedure. And I'm going to talk about that later on. So fast forward to March 24th, I have the uterine fibroid embolization. My appointment was whenever their office, so I think it was like 8 a.m. So I was there right at 8 a.m. I was in the waiting room for maybe 5 minutes before they brought me back. And during that time, they gave me a heated blanket, which was lovely. And then they started me on my IV. I know there was pain medicine. There was something for nausea, my sedation, all of that. And let me also say this, because it's not a surgery, you're not put under. You're not under anesthesia or anything. They do give you like a twilight sedation, and they told me that I may feel drowsy or I may feel sleepy, and sometimes, and they said some people may fall asleep, but it's not uncommon if you don't. And so I actually did not fall asleep. I was awake for the entire procedure. But they did start my IV with my pain medicine, nausea medicine, all of that. And they let my husband come back before they took me into the, I guess you say, operating room. And I remember one of the nurses, as she was doing my IV and everything, she's like, so we listen to music while we're doing the procedure. Do you have any requests or any artists that you want to listen to? And I'm gonna be honest, that would have been a perfect time for me to be like, yes, I want you to play worship music or something. However, I was scared. I'm not even gonna lie. I was scared and I was very nervous. And I'm like, play whatever's gonna help him to get what he needs to get done. And so Dr. McLaurin came back and talked to me before I went into the operating room and just telling me again, like, this is what I'm going to do. This is what the procedure is going to be like. And then I'm going to bring you back into the room. Then I can let your mom, your husband, whoever you want to come back. So they wheel me into the operating room. And one of the things that I really appreciated with my experience, I absolutely trusted Dr. McLaurin. I had a very positive experience and every interaction with him was very pleasant. But I did appreciate the fact that it was him and it was 3 or 4 other women who were in the room with me while he was doing the procedure. And not that I would have felt uncomfortable if it was just him, but I was like, this is a very intimate setting. And it was just very comforting to have 3 or 4 other women who were in there as well. I already felt comfortable, but that made me feel extra comfortable. And also, let me say this: I wasn't like a gown, like how you would have like a hospital gown. But the procedure, they insert the catheter through this very tiny incision at the like top part of your thigh. Your purse, your girl, she is covered. Okay, so you're not just sitting there exposed. There's nothing that they do vaginally for a UFE. All right, so the actual procedure itself, I am sitting there. They transferred me from the bed that they rolled me into this like table, I guess you would say. And I still had the warm blanket over me, and the gown was just kind of like tucked in between my legs so he could get to the incision site. And I don't recall feeling any pain. He did tell me that the insertion of the catheter, I may feel a pinch or burn. I don't even recall feeling that at all. There were certain things that he did. I don't know if it was a part of like pain medicine or something, because he did say he was inserting like some numbing stuff, that he did say something may feel, I can't remember if it was warm or cold, one of the two, and that sensation was accurate. But aside from that, I never felt anything that was painful, uncomfortable. Um, I want to say I maybe felt something like pressure wise here and there, but it was not a painful procedure. I didn't feel anything and I was awake the entire time. Another thing that I really appreciated as well, since I was awake for the entire procedure, was that they were talking amongst themselves. Because there was 4 or 5 people, including my doctor, in there at that point. They were talking amongst themselves, but he was also talking to me, and the nurses were checking on me as well. So it didn't just feel like, I'm out here exposed and y'all kikiing. It definitely felt comfortable. I didn't feel like they were ignoring me or acting like I wasn't there as he was performing the procedure. And they weren't talking about anything that was like inappropriate or anything like that. So overall, it was just like very comfortable. And I want to say I felt like I was in there maybe 30 minutes. I don't know how long I was actually in there, but it felt like it went really quickly. And once they were done, they moved me back to the bed that they rolled me in on and then took me back to the room that I got my IV and everything. And then they let my husband come back and then my mom. And then they had my husband to get me up to go to the bathroom and sent me on home. So let me go over the instructions that I was given for my pre-procedure and then also my post-procedure instructions. So the day before my procedure and the morning of, I was instructed to take naproxen, Miralax, and I believe it's omeprazole is how you pronounce it. It's like the generic for Prilosec. So the naproxen was for inflammation and pain. The Miralax, I was going to be on a whole lot of medication. That was to help me go to the bathroom. And then the omeprazole was for acid reflux, indigestion, heartburn, things like that from the medication as well. And just from not from the medication, from the procedure. In addition to that, so I had a 7-day medication regimen. So I was supposed to take 500 milligrams of naproxen, 20 milligrams of omeprazole, 1,000 milligrams of Tylenol, 5 milligrams of oxycodone, 4 milligrams of ondansetron for nausea, and then 25 milligrams of promethazine for nausea if the ondansetron wasn't working, and also taking Miralax. So I was on a whole lot of medication. So initially, my thought process was I don't want to take the oxycodone if the naproxen and the Tylenol are getting the job done. I wanted that to be like a last result. So I'm not really a fan of taking like scheduled substances. So I decided that I was going to just take the naproxen and the Tylenol, and that would be fine. I should have took that oxycodone as soon as I got home. I do feel like I would have had a probably a pain-free initial day one if I would have just went ahead and taken the oxycodone. But leading up to it, so I said I got home around 10:30, 11 a.m. I definitely had cramps. That was evident, but it was super manageable. At that point, on a scale of 1 to 10, I would give my pain level around like a 3. And then I remember it was right around 11 p.m. is when I texted my husband because I went to sleep. He was downstairs. I woke up and I texted him. I was like, I am ready to take my oxycodone because I had this persistent shooting pain that would not let up. And it wasn't even a thing of the pain being so unbearable or that it was like excruciating. On a scale of 1 to 10, I would still give my pain level around like a 3, 4 max, but it was just the persistency of it that was making it hard to sleep, making it hard to get comfortable. It was just like this dull, sharp pain. And I know dull and sharp don't make sense, but it wasn't like this stinging, like, oh my gosh, type of sharp pain, but it was just this consistent, like, it was not letting up. So I went ahead and took the oxycodone then, and it took maybe about like an hour and a half for it to kick in. Once that kicked in, the pain was manageable. The next morning, so we're in day 2 now, I went ahead and took the oxycodone when I woke up in the morning just because I did not want to deal with that sharp pain again, and I never had to take the oxycodone again. So I pretty much just stuck with the naproxen and the Tylenol for the remainder 7 days of my well, not even the remainder 7 days. I think I took that up to day 5. And the nausea medicine, I took that day 1 and day 2. I never needed to take the omeprazole or the promethazine. Those two I was good on. I never had any issues with that. But overall, the pain, day 1 was the worst of it, and that was very manageable. Honestly, I really feel like if I would have just went ahead and took the oxycodone right when I got home and then took it every 4 to 6 hours as recommended, I probably would have been fine. But I definitely didn't need oxycodone after day 1. I was perfectly fine after that. And my incision area was not sore per se, like there was no pain necessarily around it. But once I was able to get up and walk around, I did notice the more that I walked around, and we have stairs in our home, so going up and down the stairs a few times, that definitely made that area tender. And so I want to say it was day 3 or 4, I was just on the couch because it was just getting tender from the walking, but that in itself was not unbearable either. Another thing in my recovery that was a surprise to me was, I want to say it was day 1. If it wasn't day 1, it for sure was day 2. I went to use the bathroom and I got up to flush and saw something in the toilet. And I was like, I don't know what that is. So I took a picture of it and I later showed it to my doctor, and he believes that it was the 1.3 centimeter fundal submucosal fibroid that came out. And he had told me during the consultation that there is a possibility that fibroids can expel themselves once the blood supply is shut off. Apparently that's what happened with my smallest one. And I'm grateful that it was the 1.31 and not the 5 or 6 centimeter one, because your cervix dilates to release it, and ain't nobody got time for that. So yeah, so for the most part, recovery was very easy. I really didn't have any issues except for that one time for about an hour where the cramping was just being persistent. But I've seen people say that it felt like labor pains. I did not experience that. Recovery has been a breeze. So I took 2 weeks off from work I felt fine after like day 5 or 6, honestly, but I still went ahead and kept my full 2 weeks off. As I mentioned earlier, my incision was in my groin area, and I was told in the first 48 hours, 48 or 72 hours, to not sit up straight. So they wanted me laying flat so that the artery that they had essentially poked, that would seal because it was the possibility of it leaking. I never had any issues with that. Also, he said for the first 2 weeks, no working out for the first 30 days, to not insert anything in there, no sex, no tampons. Um, those were pretty much like my restrictions, really. The other thing that I will say is I've seen some women talk about having bleeding and things after the procedure. I actually was on my period when I got the procedure done, and I just started my period like a day or two before. So I can't speak to if it caused any bleeding because I was already bleeding, but my period ended on regular schedule like it normally would, and I didn't have any bleeding from March to when I had my period again in April. So my assumption is I didn't experience any bleeding. My period didn't become any heavier or anything. My period has been the same. And for anyone who didn't watch my previous video talking about my symptoms, I never had heavy bleeding. I also have an IUD. I don't know how much that contributes to it at this point, but so my periods have not changed, but my periods weren't really my symptoms or the issues that I was having with my fibroids. It was my pelvic pain, pressure, discomfort, breakthrough bleeding, things like that. But as far as my periods have always been light. My cramping has always been manageable. And so that has not changed in either way. It hasn't picked up. It hasn't lessened. It's been how it's been for the last couple of years. All right, moving on to the cost for the UFE. So I'm going to go through everything that I had to pay for leading up to UFE and the UFE itself. So for the consultation, I'll be honest, I thought the consultation was free. It was not. They billed my insurance $500, and then I later got a bill that I want to say was maybe like $50. It was minimal. It was a very minimal fee. And then when I had my MRI done, I had to pay $750 out of pocket for that. And I do believe that there was probably a cheaper option, but I went ahead and paid that because that would meet my deductible for my insurance. And I figured I was going to be paying a hefty bill for the UFE. So I'm like, well, let me go ahead and pay that, and then I don't have to worry about a deductible or anything else. So I paid that, and then I also got like several small bills like every couple weeks, a month or so later, regarding the MRI. That was like $25 here, $30 here. So for whatever that's worth. When I went in for my follow-up appointment to go over my MRI results, it was a $70 copay. When I went to actually have my UFE done, it was a $70 copay then. And when I had my UFE, it was about maybe not quite a month. It was like some weeks that went by and I'd not received a bill for it. And so I'm like, that's odd. Let me check my health insurance like website to see if it has posted so I can kind of get an idea of what I'm going to have to pay back. When I checked that website and saw that my doctor had billed my insurance $80,602.73, I was shooketh because I thought, oh my goodness, I had no idea. I never even asked how much it cost. I knew they accepted my insurance, and I needed to do something by that point. So I'm like, it don't even matter. I'm getting this done. And when I finally got my bill back, I paid $17.55 for my UFE. That was it. My insurance covered everything else. The original bill was technically $87.55. My copay that I paid when I went in, that was deducted from that. So that was the $70. My out-of-pocket expense was $17.55 for my UFE, which I'm extremely grateful for. All right, last thing I'm going to talk about is my post follow-up 3 months after my UFE. So as I said earlier, I had my UFE March 24th. I had a follow-up appointment, I think it was June 25th, June 26th. And during that appointment, I did not have to pay a copay for that, but the doctor just asked me if I noticed any improvements in my symptoms, and I have. So the main improvement that I've noticed is the pelvic pain, pressure, discomfort is gone to the point that I realized maybe like 2 months post UFE that I had not been experiencing that pain that I was so used to experiencing. I will also say, and I'm not going to go into detail with this because it's my business, but intimacy with my mans had always been uncomfortable. And the 30 days post UFE, it was a noticeable difference. Like the pain was non-existent. The discomfort was non-existent. And I had shared in the previous video that my largest fibroid had enlarged the right side of my uterus, and that is where I was feeling a lot of the pain, the discomfort, and that is gone. Like, that feeling is completely gone, and it has been a relief. And I didn't even realize just how much I had accepted, like, oh, this is normal, like this is just how it is, until I've been on the other side of it. And it's like, no, this is actually not normal. And you should feel good. You shouldn't be having this pressure, this pain, this discomfort all the time. Like, that's not normal. You've just chosen to live with it. And so I can definitely say that I have experienced a change in my symptoms for sure. I can also say that my period has not been impacted. As I said earlier, it's my period is not heavier, it's not lighter, it's what it has been. And I've never had issues when it came to my bleeding during my period or my cramping. That has always been manageable. It continues to be manageable. I've had a very good experience. I have no complaints. I feel good. I'm continuing to take iron supplements just because my iron had been low anyways. But aside from that, like, I can truly say I've noticed a difference. I did not get another MRI, and I've not had another vaginal ultrasound done. I will get that when I'll get the ultrasound done when I have my pap smear. But as of now, I can tell that the UFE worked just based off of the symptoms that I'm no longer experiencing. So that is my UFE experience. I would highly recommend Dr. Adam McLaurin with Richmond Vascular Center. I can't say that enough. I felt very taken care of. Every interaction I've had with him and the staff was just, everyone's so kind, and it was just a very pleasant experience during a very difficult time. And so I am extremely grateful for the care that I received there. And my biggest thing I would say is do your research, because as I was talking to my OBGYN about my options, this was never even discussed with me. And this is not done, like I said, through a doctor's office, hospital, or anything, not through an OBGYN. It's done through a radiologist. But this was something I had to find on my own. I did not know about it. And once I was able to do my own research and had, to see people's opinions, thoughts, the horror stories, all of that. Looking at the reviews for Richmond Vascular Center, I just felt very comfortable going with them, even though I was still nervous and anxious about it. But I had just such a pleasant experience overall. My UFE experience was very comfortable for the most part, and I could not say enough good things about them. And this ain't sponsored or nothing like that. I'm sharing this as someone who was very scared and very nervous and not knowing what to expect. But I think it's important to share a good and positive UFE experience as well, because they exist and they're out there. But do your research, talk to your doctor, get second opinions, get on Google, do what you need to. But I hope that this was helpful, and I just wanted to share my journey. I intend to probably do maybe like a 1 year update or something, because I know when I was looking at UFE stories, I had a hard time finding other people who were talking about their experience beyond like a 3 or 6 month period. And so hopefully I'll remember to share that. But I hope that this was helpful. And if there are any questions that you have about UFE, anything like that, or anything I can share as far as my fibroid journey experience or anything, leave it in the comments and I will make sure to respond. And if need be, I can do a part 2, but I feel like I covered everything thoroughly because I'm a yapper. But I hope that this was helpful, and I will talk to you all next time. Bye.